Pat, everybody, meaning Pat, welcome. Good to have you here. It is Wednesday, June 29th, 2022, and this is another live stream on the C47 channel. First one in a while. I've got the comments up. I think next week we've got an episode of Camera and Flask coming up. And first thing I just want to make sure of is that the picture and sound is coming across cleanly. You can hear me, you can see me, there's no big issues. I'm hoping there are not. Pat, since you're in the chat already, if you could let me know, that would be awesome. And good to be back here inside the barn. It's been an interesting few weeks, including a trip down to LA for some production and also Cine Gear 2022, or at least the one that's in Los Angeles. Bill, good to have you here. Chris, so much to talk about, but this week we're going to have a chat about cameras. I think that we're finally getting to the point here where I'm going to start to utilize this space a little bit more and start to create some more content. Honestly, if I want to be honest, the Grumpy Penguin is here. All is good in the world. You know, a few of my favorite things, if you come to this channel, are traveling, obviously video production and photography, and food. And we digress oftentimes talking about food, and it has been a lifelong obsession of mine. And that doesn't just mean eating, because a lot of people just eat food for the sake of survival. But I think about food and making food more than I ever should. So I'm kind of the mind that at some point it's almost inevitable that I start making videos about making food. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. David, good to have you here. As always, in the chat, it's an @the_C47. If you have a question, you want to make a comment that you want my eyes to go to when I'm talking to these fine people here. Grumpy, good to see that little video on the MC Light that you won in the photo contest. I'm glad it arrived. So I was very happy about that. And we're finally getting some nice weather here in Oregon, and Pat can attest to that, I think. So let's just have a chat. Let's talk about things. I'm going to have a little drink today. I just kind of feel like I want to. So I'm going to put a little water in here, maybe a little more than a little water. Whoa, there we go. I actually went for a while there with no drinks, and then I started drinking red wine again because I'm in wine country here in Oregon, but here's what I'm going to drink here. Let's see how this works. Boom, 1792. It's called Full Proof. I think this is probably one of the best values in a bourbon that you can get. About $50 US here. It's 125 proof, hence the copious amounts of water. I may even add a little bit more. And there you go. So let's go ahead and do this. Boom. Little bit of that, a little bit of water, and Bob's your uncle. Let me know if you're having a drink, leaded or unleaded. And Chris, speaking of contests, got to go get my entry into the Cine D Fuji X-H2S contest. Yeah. That thing's like a really short video, right? It's like 10 seconds or something. It's like a TikTok-y video. Tin cup rye and water, David. Very nice. Well, cheers to you and that. There's nothing epic about it, Ryan. It's just a big room, and I shoot at a wide aperture, and I finally dialed in my audio so it sounds semi-decent here. And that's all due to, in large part, to the MixPre 6.2 with the noise assist plugin. I have an old MacBook Pro over here, and the fans kick in a lot when I have the HVAC system running, which I don't need to today. This noise assist is some magic sauce, I have to say. What's explosive? The sound? Probably. I don't know what you're saying. Tell me, Pat. There you go. So let's talk cameras. I don't know how many people are here because I usually don't pay attention. It's usually not a lot, but it's a core group. It's an important group. We talk about real shit and we try to figure out real shit. Yeah, that drink is explosive, but I have a lot of water here. I'm almost a 50-50, so I'll be okay. Chris is having a Maker's Mark bourbon. Not really into it, to be honest. Any suggestions for this drink? Besides neat. Maker's Mark. I mean, I like a Manhattan sometimes. I like an old fashioned. I'm not really a cocktail person though. Pisco sours, Sazeracs, sidecars. Those are kind of, if I'm going to have a mixed drink, that's where I'm going. But I am a neat person. Not literally, though I am sometimes. So there you go. Lava Cat core group. Yeah. Where is oh my God, I'm losing my mind. Caleb, when you need him. I have somebody I work with named Hayden. Every once in a while, it's a slip there in terms of stuff. So I would say that we've had, and we were talking about cameras recently, and yeah, there you go. So I think we're going to continue that conversation. Getting a question about the camera I'm using from Ryan. And again, just do an at the C47 if you get a chance. There's not enough people for you to even have to do that. So I'm just talking a bunch of bullshit. You're using the Fuji to shoot this, right? Yes, I am. What color profile are you using for this live stream stuff? So right now, I'll go double check, but usually I use the neutral. Hold on, I'll be right back. Hold on. That's what I thought. It tends to be what we're using all the time in production. It's the NS film simulation. And that's the one that I find I gravitate to the most for the stuff that we're doing. And it's not just for lighter skin tones. We're actually shooting a lot of remote content right now. And the talent is black. And so they have obviously a lot darker skin tone than me. And we are using NS for that as well. I like it. Doesn't mean it's the only one to use, but it is pretty good stuff. Can you hear that plane? Just want to get somebody's take on that if you heard that. Because again, there you go. Alexa 35. Yeah. Do you have the money for that, David? Because I sure don't. I wouldn't mind renting it and using it on some jobs. But there you go. Yes. Well, Rick, the reason I use manual focus is because the AF on the X-T3 is kind of shit, to be honest with you. And I don't like the jitter. So what I'll do is I'll set something in frame every once in a while. And I kind of know where my range of motion needs to be, especially when you're shooting at like a 2 or 2.8. And so, I will say that those Fuji sensors are very sharp. No plane as far as I can hear. That's noise assist. Get yourself a Mix Pre 3 or 6 2 and pay $300 for that plug-in. It's pretty smagical. I'm under the flight pattern, Grumpy Penguin, but not really a lot of commercial aircraft. There's a small airport near here, and we get a fair number of planes. So I'm glad you didn't hear it. There you go. You got the humor in that, Rick. I appreciate it. There we go. So Alexa 35, beautiful, looking great. Nikon or Nikon Z or Z62. I'm trying to cover all bases here. You're smagical, Caleb. Come on. I almost called you Hayden earlier. You and I haven't talked in a long time, and in theory, next week is our Cameron Flash. So you and I, can we talk tomorrow and figure this out? That would be a beautiful thing. I just haven't been on the live stream on the channel for a while, and it is time to do that. And I just wanted to talk cameras because I think that, we're kind of in that place now where we've got some new cameras that have come to market, and there's a lot of other cameras that have been in the market for the last year or two, and that goes, starting kind of down at the GH6 all the way up to this Alexa 35 stuff. and everything in between. And it's crazy. Yeah. Thanks for dropping in. Give me a ring. I get to go do my annual physical tomorrow morning, but I'll be back probably at about 10 o'clock Pacific. So, Caleb, just ping me and let me know when is a good time to catch up. I'd love to tomorrow. We'll chat out next week's show, figure out what we're going to talk about, and just catch up on things in general. And safe travels home. So, David says, hell no to the amount of money for an Alexa 35. It's a renting camera. Or if you're a cinematographer, you are buying and sub-renting that camera and making an income off of it. But let's get the chat going here, and let's start talking about the cameras that you are currently shooting with, what you do like about those cameras, if you're going to expand within that camera system's ecosystem, if you're looking to go into, maybe because you've had a camera system for a long time, a new ecosystem or new cameras entirely, and replace the ones that you're using. And just talk about the cameras that are in the market right now and what you think about them, where you think they could improve. And I'm here kind of as a sounding board to help you, almost as a, I don't say a consultant, but help you kind of figure out where you're going with your cameras. And, you know, I'm not outside of this realm either. Pat's still digging the FX9. Don't know if I wouldn't have bought the FX6 if it was available at the time. I mean, you got a slightly smaller form factor, but I would say that the FX9 is giving you definitely more camera and should be for the money. Yeah. So Chris has been so busy with school that Chris has only had interest in shooting 35mm black and white stills. Yeah, which is a lot of fun. Little embarrassed, but currently shooting most of my stuff on my iPhone 13 Pro. Not great, but working for my short YouTube content. There's nothing embarrassing about that. In fact, if you compare, take selected focus out of it, right? Where we can have the ability to have deep to shallow depth of field with a lot of selective control over that, right? Because if we're talking about an iPhone 13 series, we do have the, you know, albeit a little crippled, but we do have that cinematic mode, right? Which is simulating a shallow depth of field in a video, realm. Filmic Pro is giving you a lot of options in terms of codec. And quite honestly, despite the small sensor, decent dynamic range, very nice quality of picture. I always say that smaller sensor cameras, especially action cameras and smartphone cameras, create incredible footage in ideal to good conditions. And it's when those conditions start to degrade that the quality of the image starts to degrade again. But nothing embarrassing about it. I don't think Filmic Pro or any of the other third-party developers can tap into that cinematic mode, which is essentially portrait mode for video on the iPhone. And largely crippled because you would think that the first place that they would have put that into would be 24 frames per second, and it's 30, which is kind of ridiculous because it's a lower frame rate that you would expect, more cinematic, at least in terms of the look and feel, the cadence. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that 24 wasn't there because it's actually less data that's being processed, not more. So weird. Pat's seen crew calls for cable shows requiring iPhones. Look, years ago, BBC started creating educational series for their journalists to use smartphones in production. Obviously, DSLRs were used tremendous amount, still are, mirrorless cameras. And mirrorless is a weird label for a camera system because virtually every camera that comes to market now is, unless it is a DSLR and it has a mirror in it, is mirrorless. Every digital cinema camera is a mirrorless camera. The Alexa 35 is a mirrorless camera. But we kind of use that label for things like Micro Four Thirds to, APS-C style camera systems. And as soon as it goes into a super 35 millimeter sensor, full frame sensor, than in a larger camera body, because obviously you can have those size sensors in mirrorless type camera bodies, then we call them mirrorless, but they're all mirrorless. Let's just be honest. This may sound strange, but I may be done with cameras. I'm 60 years old and I know what I like and have what I like. I may stand pat until, stand put until I croak. It's kind of liberating. Rick, there's nothing wrong with sticking with what you love. And if you're creating the images and the content that you like with what you have, I see no reason to change that. Honestly, behind this wall, there's a lot of equipment that I will rarely use, if at all, and I'm thinking about taking a bunch of that and just donating it to a school that I went to. So yeah, I totally understand. Okay, FX6 here for Ryan for our branded dock work. Been loving it. Very versatile camera. I do think that Sony's definitely gotten a nicer look now over the years. Aaron is using, hopefully that's pronounced correctly because it's EHREN. Using GX6 for personal work. I'm still rooting for the underdog of M43 C200 for real work. Wish I had a C300 Mark III or C70 due to all the updates since the C200's release. I still have a C200. I think my biggest gripe with that camera is it's soft. You take a look at footage coming off of the new sensors, not only with other camera manufacturers, but Canon as well. And it's very clear that in the last few years, we've entered a much sharper sensor realm in terms of that. So yes, lenses have something to do with it, but the sensor itself very clearly does. And Ryan says, recently picked up a GoPro Hero 10, and I've been really impressed with that. Again, I would say probably in good to ideal conditions. I haven't picked up a GoPro in a long time, mainly because every single time I buy one, I use it for a very short period of time, and then it goes into a drawer or on a shelf and doesn't really get used very often. And I think part of that is that a lot of the cameras that I have are small to begin with. They're not quite action cameras, but when you start talking about an X-T3, X-T4, those types of cameras, I don't know. I mean, I'm very inclined to, just going back to Grumpy Penguin, using an iPhone for some of that type of stuff as well. I don't love using smartphones as a main camera system because we use them for so many other things, but they can produce some pretty remarkable stuff. And if you turn everything off and just use it as a camera, you can get some great stuff. Matt says, just picked up the Canon R5C as a stills/B camera. Interested to know what you're thinking about using it as a B camera for, at least at the moment, because you're really enjoying it and thinking about making it your primary A camera as it works so well. Though I still stare longingly at the XH2S. So do I. I should get one in-house pretty soon. I'm also hoping to get an R5C in pretty soon. And I think that the C70, R5C, both really interesting cameras right now from Canon. That 8K, downsample to 4K, the footage on the R5C looks pretty phenomenal. And I think I can get around the fan thing. It's not like digital cinema cameras don't have fans. And it's a dual boot system. So when you go into the R5C, when you're in stills mode, you are getting a more traditional Canon menu system. And then possibly introduced originally from the C200, you're getting that style, video style menu when you go into video in that camera. So I think really interesting. At the same time, the C70, slightly bigger, little bit bulkier, but you've got mini XLR, terminals. You've got, more larger terminals. You're not doing a micro HDMI. You're doing full HDMI. Built-in NDs are huge on the camera like that. AF system, from what I can see, may take the edge on the R5C over the C70, but the C70 is the workhorse, right? That's sort of like your corporate documentary, you know, entry camera in a digital cinema camera, at least from Canon. And then you have FX6 and some other cameras from other manufacturers. I do feel like when you're, you know, small to no crew, that the consideration of getting a camera system with a strong AF system is important to consider. That's a lot of considers. Again, I said it again. But there you go. Ryan says we have a large client who pays extra to have someone on set only shooting vertical iPhone while we capture stuff on FX6s. Yes, I mean, that's happening. And, you know, you want to go even higher resolution. Take a camera like the Canon R5C, and that's very well suited for that kind of stuff. Vertical video. And vertical video has some advantages when you're shooting things like green screen too, in terms of maximizing resolution, as long as talent's not moving outside of that frame. Yep. Okay. So coffee talk and tech. Hey, good to have you in the chat. For my YouTube needs, 2 Sony A6400s, still pretty decent AF system, and 2 ZV or ZV E10s, which I believe have 1-inch sensors, if I'm not mistaken. 6400s have APS-C with a few lenses, do well for me. Yeah, but Rick still loves nerding out about cameras. We all do. I've loved the Nikon mirrorless system. Obviously, there's plenty of other options, but that full frame 6 and 6.2 have yet to let me down in the last 4 years in a variety of environments under 2K US. Yep. I mean, look, Nikon makes great stuff too. It would be great to see stronger focus assist, you know, video assist features in there. But I totally agree. Matt says R5C is so sharp. Such a nice image. Agreed. Am I powering my live stream cam via AC? I am, Rick. I think a pretty big advantage to the XT series from Fuji is that I can power the cameras over USB-C. So you have to get a power delivery brick that's providing enough power. I think it's what is it? I don't know. I think it's at least 3 or 5 amp. I'd have to look at it. But basically, you power delivery brick, and then you have a USB-C power delivery cable, because that's kind of the trick with USB-C. There's so many variations of it. Data cables, power delivery cables, you know, blah, blah, blah. But that's how I'm powering a lot of this stuff. In fact, the MixPre 6.2, the monitor that I use for the teleprompter right there, the X-T3, the X-T4, they're all powered by USB-C. And I'm a big fan of that. That doesn't mean there isn't a lot of things in here that are not powered by that. There are, but there you go. Josh Satin did a video comparison with the Canon R5C and the R7 and couldn't tell the difference. Interesting. For stills or video? I'm assuming you mean for video, but maybe I'm wrong, Bill. Matt has a couple of Pocket 6Ks and loves them, but power issues, lack of AF, weird form factor, and I find myself in a one-man band more than not, having pushed me back towards Canon, hence the R5C. That makes sense. Okay. I am tracking with you. Yeah, I mean, it hasn't happened yet, and they just did another rev on one of their 6K cameras. Kind of a strange one, but because they didn't put NDs in it, I don't think. Which one was that? That was the, hold on, Blackmagic. Come on, kid. Not the, it's the 6K. They just added stuff to. I'm going to go, I was just looking at that a couple of days ago on, what is it? Somebody, here, the Blackmagic update. There's a lot of stuff coming out here. I'm interested in those Laowa nanomorph lenses, those 1.5x, by the way. Those look kind of interesting to me. Oh, here it is. It's the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K G2. So they put the tilt screen on there, a couple of other things from the Pro version, but I don't think they didn't put the built-in NDs. So there you go. What else have we got? DJI removes. Oh, that was a long time ago. These are old articles. Forget that. There we go. All right, back to the chat. Let's go. Video C-Log 10-bit 422. Yep, Bill. Matt says I also have an X100V. I do too. I love it. Fuji is a compelling option now, especially with the XH2S. We are spoiled for choices. Totally, Matt. And that is the next camera that I'll be getting in to sort of check out. We know that the codecs are good in terms of what options you have. Whether or not you wind up using those day in, day out and go the ProRes route, I'm not sure. But I like the flexibility of what you can get with that camera. So internally, I like what I'm hearing about it. Externally, in terms of recording, I like what I'm hearing about it. I've seen it at Cinegear. It's definitely a camera that I want to test out. And, you know, I'm kind of in two ecosystems. I'm in a Canon ecosystem and a Fuji ecosystem. For a lot of the stuff that I'm doing in this space, it's more Fuji. And when I go outside into the world, it's kind of a combination. Probably one of the most compelling things for me is actually the low data rate quality of the Fuji cameras. A lot of what we're shooting right now is we're using noise reduction, and, you know, high ISO noise reduction, and using film simulations and shooting a lot of green screen footage at 100 megabits per second, H.265. And yeah, it's a little bit of math for your timeline, but pretty remarkable what you can get out of that sensor, and not in ideal situations. So it doesn't mean that you can't get great results with other cameras, but I will say that, yeah, there you go. What do you mean you dropped the X100V? Come on, Rick. You totaled it? That is not good. Philip says, if I were switching, I'd go straight to Fuji, zero question. Look, it's a beautiful image in camera, right? And there's a new log profile in the XH2S, which I want to try. But honestly, for most of the work that I do, we're not shooting in log at this point. If I'm going to go shoot hero footage, get a camera up on the drone, do stuff where I'm really trying to hold highlights outside, yes, we're going to go log. Absolutely. I'm not afraid of log. And as long as you find your starting point, whether it's a LUT or you're going to go ahead and take your footage to a colorist or whatever it's going to be, then log is fantastic. It gives you just have to understand how to expose for it correctly. And it's not always the white paper that the company gives you. But it's great stuff. But I really love the film simulations in the Fuji cameras. I like a lot of the picture, profiles that you're getting in other camera manufacturers as well. They're sort of film stocks, but I definitely lean to those Fuji ones. But if I can get it right in camera with a little bit of a tweak here and there, a lot of it is just kind of dialing in your lighting and stuff. I mean, it took me a while to figure out where in this Fuji ecosystem I liked where the image landed. So I didn't look like a pasty, limey Brit. And, part of that is sort of dialing in and figuring out, based on the fixtures you're using, what you have to do. And I will say that in an LED fixture, having a plus minus green magenta can make a big difference. If I didn't have that, then, every time you switch a film simulation picture profile, picture style, if you're Canon, it's figuring out that stuff. And not all LED lights from different manufacturers play well with others. That's why there's that SSI reading. And one of the best places to look for that is on News Shooter. When Matt Allard does his lighting reviews, he focuses on that. And really, he's one of the few people who does and says, oh, here's a new light. How well does it play with other manufacturers' lights in the industry? And that's pretty important. Matt says, I think I might be heading towards the same split Canon Fuji system and chucking the Blackmagics. I mean, if you're in a DaVinci Resolve ecosystem, if you are doing your editorial in Resolve, I see a huge argument for Blackmagic, save for form factor / ergonomics and the lack of an AF system that is anything that can be used. Let's see. Great. Good. Perfect. We were in production today and somebody was just finishing stuff up and was just giving me an update. So, if you're in that Blackmagic ecosystem, thank goodness I remember what I was just talking about, and you're using DaVinci Resolve, and I think Blackmagic Raw is pretty fantastic, then I think you're great. And it extends beyond that. You start talking about broadcasting and doing things like this, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of taking an ATEM mini system or the Extreme and having camera control using their software and being able to go in there and basically paint in camera, control camera features. So if you're in a Blackmagic ecosystem, I think it's pretty great. At the same time, when I'm talking to my clients about what camera system are they going to go into and how are they going to use it, very oftentimes you're not going to have people who are well versed in and well educated in how a camera is set up and how to use it. So the more you can give them by dialing in picture styles, picture profiles, film simulations, understanding the limitations of where you can push in terms of ISO, where you can push in terms of where your black levels fall, all that stuff. Those are all really important things. And we did tests for probably a month plus on the Fuji cameras to find a formula that worked where we were really happy with the image. And I mean really happy. I can't say enough about that. But they're all great right now. R5C, C70, FX series from Sony, A7 series from Sony. All fantastic in terms of the basic image that you can get. And then there's pluses and minuses for each of those systems in terms of what you can do. Rick says, I dropped my X100V off the back of my bike, totaled the rear screen. It still works. I can't bring myself to pay $500 for the repair. Yeah, it's hard to pay almost half of what you paid for the camera system, but that's how things work. I just screwed up the bumper on my car. The car's X number of dollars, but to fix that one part of it is disproportional to the cost of the car. But unfortunately, that's the way it works. We all know that. How do you determine how to expose for log? Well, Rick, it's camera to camera, and it also isn't just camera to camera. It's which log profile you're using. Because it's a logarithmic curve, it basically, a linear curve is basically giving equal amounts of data and let's just say that to everything that goes from your blacks to your whites. And in a logarithmic curve, what you're doing is, generally exposing that middle part of your image. Let's just say the 2/3 of your image, similarly to what you would do in a linear curve. Not exactly, but you're pulling down your highlights and you're lifting up your shadows so that you get more dynamic range, right? Number of stops that you're capturing. And then you have to redistribute those generally so that those highlights go back up to where they need to be and the shadows go down to about where they need to be. And so because of those variables and the way each manufacturer tunes, unfortunately, the different sensors that they make in the different cameras, you won't necessarily expose for log the same way or for each log profile exactly in the same place. So generally, I would say a safe place would be like if you were shooting in Rec 709, you would generally expose middle gray at about 50, halfway between on a histogram, and about halfway on a waveform monitor when you're looking at luminance values. So about 50. And then when we're exposing for log, I generally find that I'm exposing middle gray. Some manufacturers say go all the way down to like 33, 34 on the waveform monitor. I generally find that it's sort of that 40 to 50 range, usually 40 to 45, where that sweet spot for exposing middle gray is. You got to watch your highlights, and you have to know where that curve is. Sometimes the curve isn't at 100 in terms of where it ends. It's 95 or closer to 90, and where, you know, it's lifting and where your range is. But generally, I would say you're exposing for middle gray when you're shooting log at between 40 and 45, because the last thing you want to do in the world is, if you expose too low, then for log, then you're going to be lifting your shadows and you're going to see noise in those shadows. So the goal is to get your middle gray and the upper part of your image sort of where they need to be, where you might be lifting your highlights a little bit more, but you want to be pushing your shadows down. You want to be getting those down into a place where you can still see into the shadows if you want, but you know, you're adjusting the image down. So Brandon's here. The live stream has started. It's ridiculous. So hopefully, Rick, that gives you a little bit of data. I do cover some of that stuff in the Canon videos that I've done in the past, not in all of them, but there are some certain episodes where I do that. Yeah, so there you go. And, you know, I also want to get a sense from everybody. I know everybody's working and doing things, but do you want to do more of these? Do you want to do more Q&As and things like that? Linda's here. Hey, Linda. You used to drift, Grumpy Penguin? I'm not surprised. You know, my dad used to, back when he was a kid in Pennsylvania, I'd kill my kids if they would do it. They used to go out on frozen lakes and race cars. Psycho. Nuts. All right. FF Penguin Drift. There we go. Yes, it's been a while, Linda. Glad to have you. Brandon, ridiculous. All right, so there we go. I've answered some of those questions. We still have time here. What other things do we want to talk about? What other camera things do you want to talk about? Bring up a camera. I'll talk about it. I'm down. And if I don't know a lot about it, I'll tell you I don't. Rick's Polish. I could use a Q&A every day. That's ridiculous. All right. Hilarious. My stepmom used to race Austin Minis on the frozen lakes of northern Canada. Yeah. The chances of those lakes actually giving in northern Canada are far less than in Pennsylvania, let me tell you. So that's my feeling. All right. What else do we want to talk about camera-wise? Want to go over any other things here? I'm ready. Let's do it. Doesn't have to be cameras, by the way. You want to talk about something else related to video production, filmmaking, or food? You want to talk about food? I'm ready. Anytime you want. I have ideas. I have one of my friends has a milestone birthday coming up, and they want Persian food. So that's going to be, I've got to learn how to make that. I forgot how you call it. I don't usually say I forgot how you call it. It's a rice dish, and you cook the rice, but then it has this crust underneath. If there's anybody from Iran here, anybody who cooks Persian food, somebody will remember. What is it? Is it not fotash? It's like, I don't know. Somebody will bring it up, I hope. What do you mean DRI option in the Fuji X-T3? I'm maybe the acronym is just throwing me, Mullen. So Moyen. Hopefully I said that correctly. Clarify for me, please. That would be great. Please. Is it too late to get good money for my C100 Mark II? It is absolutely too late. But it's still a great camera. 4K sensor, great, sharp. Sometimes I would say sharper image than C200. Brandon, R5C interested about how its dual ISO stacks against Sony's low light ability. Not sure. I haven't heard any bad things about the R5C in low light. You know, I'm pretty happy if I can get a very usable image out of a camera system at 3200 ISO. I think that's still kind of amazing. And if you can push a camera to 64 and get something that's, you know, real without a lot of work in post. I think that's fantastic. Food had great payo de... come on. Oh, wait, you went to Sao Paulo. I can say Sao Paulo. I can't say the name of that dish. Did you have a fixer? I've heard some things about that place. My buddy went down there to play because he tours as a musician. And yeah, there's a lot of great places in Sao Paulo, but some not so safe. Tell us more about your audio system that's working so well. How do you use it, etc.? Okay, Pat, I'll do that. Chris says I'm the worst cook. I literally put the awful in falafel. I'm on a goat cheese kick right now. Yeah, the food stuff's happening. But let's go to the audio thing, and then I'll keep going. So, I mean, there's not a lot to it. So the basic setup is it's a Mix Pre 2 series. So this is the 6 that I have up here, but there's the 3. Very hard to get right now because Sound Devices is primarily selling the 6 and the 10, but the 6 a lot because it's virtually the same price for them to make a 3 or a 6, and they're going to put the chips into the 6. That may have changed over the last couple of months, but that was kind of what they were doing. And you add a plugin that can go to one of your channels. So you can assign it to any of your channels. I've used it on XLR1. I've used it on the 3.5 millimeter for the wireless Go system. In fact, if you go to my channel and you go to not the live videos, but you watch the Westcott event, I was using the wireless Go there. Probably could have dialed it down just ever so slightly. It felt a little bit hot to me, but I was still using noise assist on that channel. So when I was walking around, it was taking a lot of that ambient noise away. It wasn't eliminating it completely, but like right now, there's a prop plane or something going overhead, and at least based on the test we had earlier on, you're not really hearing it. And it's just kind of listening. It's sort of a live, maybe you can hear it now. I don't know. This noise assist thing is pretty magical. It's magical, as we would say. But basically what it does is it listens, and it's kind of like Isotope RX with their noise reduction, but it's doing it in real time. So I've got a Rode NTG 5 here, and that's just going straight to the Mix Pre 6.2. And then there's a 3.5 millimeter cable going directly into the X-T3. And of course, the other advantage to the Mix Pre 2 series is that you can record in 32-bit float. So you could record to camera, and if everything's great and everybody's happy with it, great, you have single system sound, but you can also just pull that SD card and you got 32-bit float. So regardless of where your pots are, you've got all of that data, right? You can get what you need out of it. So that's a beautiful thing. All right, let's see. I'm scrolling down here. Come on. I'm getting a super chat for $4.99. Shall we show it? We should, if I remember how to do it. I put a star on there. I don't know what that means. Boom. Here it is. $4.99 super chat from Aaron Fleschner. Watched your Fujifilm Slim Jim presentation demo. Reminded me to use my 1x2 flex light. Thanks. You are quite welcome, and thank you for the super chat. That was a pretty big challenge and kind of goes over to Philip's question. Any tips on live YouTube sessions? I'm thinking about trying this format out with my channel, Lessons Learned. Consistency. That might be one of them. I didn't realize these stay up forever now. It's probably a setting I put them on. But again, thank you, Aaron, for that. It helps. Everything helps on the channel. Live is hard. It takes a lot of planning. I mean, this is pretty easy. We're just having a conversation. But when I did the Adorama Westcott Scrim Jim Cine presentation, the Scrim Jim system has a lot of parts to it. And it took me the better part of a week to sort of set up what I was going to do. So I had A camera, I had B camera, I had another, which is the X100V, which was set up over there, which is essentially the wide camera for the room. And then I had a Hero camera right here, which is just sitting over there, which is a C200 for sort of a standard interview setup. And that was all being switched through the A10 Mini Pro. And then I tried all kinds of things to basically make the software control of the A10 Mini remote on an iPad. In the end, I had to hardwire it. So USB-C from the MacBook Pro to that, and then being able to switch between the cameras. So if you want to check that out, I think planning and I think consistency, but I think the expectation from an audience's standpoint now is that your picture quality has to be somewhat decent and your audio has to sound pretty good. I definitely a shortcoming for me for a long time. It's not perfect right now, but I would say that my audio is dialed in a way that is so much better than it used to be. So happy to talk about that some more. And wait a second, Jesus, a lot of stuff. What's going on here? Rick, come on in. There we go. From Rick, I see. Wait. You finally figured out your live stream lighting. Once you dial in your white balance, you'll really be cooking. Yeah, I think that's a little bit subjective there. And you can give me your feelings on that, whether you feel it's too warm, too cool, it's a little too magenta, a little too, green. It's, somewhat subjective there. It also has a lot to do with what screen you're using and how you're looking at it. And it's also sometimes hard because I've got a MacBook Pro here. I've got a crappy little monitor there. This is a piece of crap right over here. So there's a lot of things that could get better. But thank you so much for the super chat. And yeah, I'm always open to your feedback and your input on the things that you're seeing on your side, because I would say that when I started doing daily videos, when I started Gearbox back in earnest 2009, a lot of what helped me grow in terms of how I got better at doing things were the comments. Some of them stung, some of them were not easy to swallow, but it made me sort of step back and look at it and say, how can I do that better? Because there's a lot of things that I'm not happy about when I do production, but I also know that the basic is your picture good? Is your sound great or good to great, but hopefully really good? And then does it communicate? In fact, that's really the most important thing, is sort of, is what you're delivering communicating well, educating, teaching something, communicating what the branding message of your company is, or marketing message, or call to action, and then sound, and then picture. Picture is actually last for the most part. But yeah, give me your feedback on that. It'd be great. It is the cheese bread, Ono Coffee says, that he had in Sao Paulo. And if I had a host organization you had a host organization that took you around. Sounds good. What is my go-to LED light kit these days? I don't really have one, Linda. It kind of changes. Again, it's figuring out what lights play well with others. I mean, here in the studio, I use the Nanlite Mix Panel 150 for the key here. I like it because it has this sort of active diffusion, so I can change it in the light. When I was doing the live stream, I set up a second one of them so that they would match. And that's that light right there. You can't see it. It's just so it was more ambient light in the space, but it was just so you could see more of what I was doing. And that was kind of important. Let's turn that off. Boom. There you go. And, but then when I'm out in the world, it could be a sky panel. It could be an aperture light. Loving what Aperture's doing with a lot of their fixtures now. A lot of the things that I'm talking to clients about. For instance, I have a client that I've been doing work for a while. They're building out a new studio space, and we're looking at the P300Cs and the P600Cs as their main lights. 300s either in like space, light configurations, or just, going down through soft boxes onto the cyc. 600s I really like because they have pixel mapping, larger fixtures. So like 3 of those in a 25-foot span should give you a nice kind of what they call wall of fire, which is a kind of standard way that news lighting is done. Sorry, ring of fire is not wall of fire. Ring of fire. It's just like this consistent wash of light everywhere. But if you have 3 of those in pixel mapping, you one in the center, 2 on the sides, those larger kind of 2x1s, you could do a lot of stuff there. I think Nanlight's making some great stuff. There's a lot of options right now on the market. When we go to Brazil, the Grumpy Penguin says, we always have a handler. And I don't know why you're going to Brazil. I don't want to know, Grumpy, but, I'm just saying. David says, our horror double feature was a gem at the Chattanooga Film Festival. I have family that lives very close there and has had 3 nice reviews by horror critics. The third Saturday in October, part 5 and part 1. Interesting. I'm trying to figure out the part 5 and part 1 part. You have to clarify for me. Rick says, I'm mostly a stills photographer, lots of food gigs. I keep waiting for food video to break for me, but it never did. Yeah, I know. It's tough. There we go. So David's making stuff. That's good. Andrew coming in. Almost missed the stream. You made it. You're in for like the last 10, 15. Yes. No, I got that, Rick. No problem on Scrim Jim versus Slim Jim. Though I've eaten a Slim Jim, maybe a third of one in my life. And that's how far I got. If you know anybody who's South African, you've ever had biltong, then you'll never eat a Slim Jim again. And pretty much any other stuff like that. In layman's terms, explain why 32-bit float is best. Well, 32-bit float can apply to imagery and it can also apply to sound. But basically, think about being in a room. You're in a room right now and you have a ceiling and you have a floor. And the ceiling and the floor are fixed, right? So whatever's inside of that space, it can't go above the ceiling unless you break through the ceiling, and it can't go below the floor. So you have kind of a fixed, we'll just say that's 16-bit sound or something, right? And as you're recording, if you crank essentially your levels too far, what happens is it hits the ceiling and it clips. It can't go above the ceiling, so you get clip sound. And if you set your pots, the little dials, too low, and you're too low, if you try to bring that sound up, it's very similar to what we're talking about with log. You basically introduce noise, right? You're lifting the noise floor in order to get to the levels you need. Well, with 32-bit float, it's like totally different thing. You basically can go above the ceiling and below the floor. So that even though you're setting your levels on your meters so that they look correct, if you didn't, or you turned your pot all the way down or you turned it all the way up, you wouldn't clip. There would be more data above the ceiling and below the floor. And that's true for imagery too. 32-bit float like EXR files, which are used a lot in post-production for special effects stuff and things like that, also have that same advantage. Hopefully that's a explanation that makes sense. Okay, there we go. My biggest struggle these days is consistency, Philip says. Do more of these Q&As. They're fun and educational. Yeah, I will. Good. David was credited as key grip and background extra scene in part 1. Does that mean were you having a drink in that one? I don't know, David. As playing the bartender. I know, Rick, you do, but you like busting balls. That's okay. I'm okay with that. I got a thick skin. David just got a P600C. That is a pretty awesome light. And then there you go. 32-bit gives you magical powers, Philip says. Allows you to bring down clipping or bring under-gained audio without much noise. Aaron saying, I am tired of not having Bluetooth in my lights. Rent LED, some aperture lights last year, and now I don't want to go back to dumb lights, in quotes. I agree. I mean, that Sidus link and that whole, get a Sidus bridge, so it's a little more reliable. There's 2 things for me, is being able to control your lights either through Bluetooth or a remote or something like that. Even the original aperture lights came with that little remote with multiple channels. That was great. I think that's a big advantage, but hold on. I need a little drink. But the app ecosystem is getting really good. I mean, obviously, Arri has their game together. Their app ecosystem is beautiful, but other manufacturers are coming in and doing some really strong stuff. I would say that Aperture is very strong right now in that realm, and Sidus Link and being able to control stuff that way. I like what's happening. And when I was at Cine Gear and I saw the lights from so many manufacturers, you know, when I have conversations, I often ask, how strong is your app ecosystem and how well does it work with your fixtures? Got a new interesting stick from an unknown stock from an I don't know what this means, Andrew. Something's happening. Do I have any thoughts or experience with Edelkrone? Yes, I have some experience with them. I think they're amazing industrial designers. I think that a number of the products that I've tried with them fall short in some ways. Like, I love their little slider, the original one that is motorized, but your battery has to sit inside of that little, there's no on-off switch. Let's just put it that way. And I have a gripe with most products that don't have an on-off switch. I understand it for a broadcast in a rack-based system or with something like an A10 Mini because of the way that it's designed. Still wish it had an on-off switch, to be honest with you, but I get it. But when it comes to something like a motorized slider or things like that, the two things that kind of fell short for me with Edelkrone were A, things like that, and B, the unreliability of the app-based ecosystem. So if you're going to build an app for a piece of equipment, that thing has to be rock solid, right? There you go. Andrew has a new film stock that he's using. I'm ready, Andrew. Maybe that should be part of a challenge. I get a down thumb? What'd I get a down thumb for? That's sad. Is that Rick saying, are you like Edelkrone? Somebody's got to tell me what that... I got one of these. I'm a little sad. But I got 4 of these, so, you know, what are you going to do? Part 5 was made first as a love letter spoof of slasher flicks. The filmmakers then wanted to make the original to show how a franchise get crazy the more they make. Part 5 is played first. Oh, that's funny. And then you go to part 1. Like it. All right. There we go. We're 3 minutes to the end of this thing. What do we got? Fuji's app sucks. Is that's not the down thumb? Yeah, it does suck. I wish their app was great. It's not. And they keep adding cameras like the X-H2S to the app's capabilities, but actually, I have a call with somebody at Fuji on Friday. I'm glad you brought that up, Rick. App might be part of the conversation too. It doesn't mean that the person has any control over it, but it'd be nice to know if there was a roadmap for that. Cool. What else do we got? Let's wrap this thing up in the next couple of minutes. Any other questions, any other comments that people have here on the interwebs? We'll do more. Looks like next week is going to be an episode of Cameron Flask, and Lava Cat maybe makes a special appearance. ProLight. That ProLight, that new one, looks great. There you go. Represent us. What does that mean, Rick? Tell me more. All right. Shame on you for the down thumb, whoever did it. I don't really care. Favorites. Oh, yeah. I favorited you. I see. Now I'm understanding how this all works. That's what I got for you, kids. Here we go again. I don't know what that means, Brandon, but there you go. How do you get rid of extra green from Fuji cameras? I'm not sure what that means. You need to give me information. Are you talking about shooting on green screen or a green cast because of it? Partially that can be from using maybe plus minus green on a light fixture. If you feel that a film simulation has too much green, color correction in post-production, lots of different ways. I try to get it as close as possible in camera. There you go. I'm not sure, but keep checking on the titles. The third Saturday in October, 5, and 1. Color correct. Green cast, yes. I don't know if Fuji cameras have green cast all of the time. There's some really nice film simulations there. If you white balance the camera system, shouldn't be too big of an issue. But there you go. That's it. We hit 4 o'clock. And I don't know what to say. We did it. It's an hour. Glad you came, Brandon, and everybody else. And you are welcome for the education. It's not always there, but I try. The goal is always to help you learn something more or think about something more. And hopefully I'll see everybody next week. Same time, same bat channel, all that fun stuff. And I don't know. See you on the flip side. Take care.